start.
Okay, so today is Friday, November 10th, 2017. And if you could just start by telling us your full name.
Okay. My name is Maria Dolores Santillán.
Okay. And Maria or Dolores?
Dolores, I go by Dolores.
Dolores, okay. Where were you born and where did you grow up? For both places, if they were different.
No, I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, and how was your childhood growing up there?
It's very different than it is here. It's very gentrified because of the way the city is, but at the same time, it's very easy to find what you're looking for. So, if you're hungry for Puerto Rican food, you know, you can hit up Humboldt Park. You know, if you're looking for Mexican food, you can hit up 26th Street. If you're looking for soul food, you can hit up, you know, Lake Street, and you know where you are.
Okay.
So it's very different, but it's like, because it's so big, it's got these smaller communities where it makes you feel like it's a small town and people know you and you're safe. Okay,
yeah. So what is your heritage? Was there a strong, like, cultural community for you in Chicago?
Yeah, both of my family's Mexican. I was the firstborn here in the United States, so it was a very strong connection to, you know, the Mexican community. But at the same time, you know, with immigrant parents, they're like trying to prove a point. So it's like, you're American.
Yeah.
So it was that too.
Okay. So did you guys speak a lot of Spanish in the house growing up?
Yeah. Or? Spanish was in the house. English was outside the house.
Okay. And so did you start to learn English when you went to school?
Yeah. So for a bit, I didn't speak English very well. So I had to go to night school with them. And then watch a lot of PBS to catch up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So did you learn primarily through, like, going to those classes with your parents?
I think I went to a couple other classes, but honestly it was more PBS than anything else because it ran 24 hours a day and it was in clear English, so you could understand, you could follow through with it pretty well.
And so do you have other siblings that were born later in the United States?
Yeah, I have a younger sister who was born a bit later, but she's mostly all English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but does she still speak some Spanish with your family?
She tries, but it doesn't make sense. It's very broken.
Oh,
so.
okay.
Yeah.
So, how are you and your sister close? Did you have?
We have a 7-year difference, so we're not terribly close, but we definitely check in on each other once in a while.
Okay. Yeah. And so, what are a few like memorable times from your childhood? Would you say, or things that were memorable from your childhood in Chicago?
That's tough. Okay, I like condense it. I think going to school for the first time, and this was during the time where they would ask you, like, do you speak Spanish or do you speak English? And then they would separate you if you said, oh, well, I speak Spanish. So I would lie and I said I spoke English, and I would misspell my name every time because the I and the E always sound different. You know, like when you translate it, it sounds the same, so I would mess up my last name every time. But I would figure it out eventually. So it was during that time, and so it was kind of a struggle too, I think, for my parents to tell the teachers to be like, hey, she needs to be learning English, if she needs to be in this class. And then the teachers who, you know, it's a public school, they have a lot of kids, and it's like, we can't be teaching one person that whole time. So that definitely stuck with me through a lot of school. Let's see, I think the other one, I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan forever. And so when I first went to Wrigley Field, I went when I was in 5th grade, and we were part of the safety patrol program. So as a reward for doing that sort of community service, our mentor took us to the Cubs game. And so we went, and it was the first time I've ever been to a baseball game, first time at Wrigley. And I mean, as soon as you walk in, there's a whole bunch of people because it's such a tight-knit, you know, Cub fan community. And it was as if they knew us. They were like high-fiving us. We were there. And then we're watching the game. This was back when Sammy Sosa was playing. So that was like every little kid's dream was like, I'm going to scream out for Sammy. So we did. And I think the funniest part of that whole thing was they do the 7th-inning stretch. It's a big deal. And back in I didn't know it was such a big deal. It was my first game. But I did not know I did not know what they were singing. I was like, guess I'm just going to get up and pretend that I know what's happening. So I looked at my cousin, we're very close, and I was like, dude, I have no idea what they're singing. He's like, I don't know either, but I think there's a chorus somewhere in there. We'll just jump in at the chorus. And I was like, he's got my back. And so we did, and like we have a great, so like I still remember that time because we were so young, but it was like the Cubs game, that's when I knew, I was like, this is where I live at. I know like how big of a deal the city is, and so it really sticks out. So I think those two are the biggest ones that stick out from growing up in Chicago, is like going to a baseball game and trying to learn English.
So going back to learning English, did you feel even when you were so little, that there was a negative connotation to saying that you knew Spanish in school?
Yeah, because it was, like I said, when you go to public school, a lot of teachers don't want to be dealing with, if you're not going to understand me, I'm not going to start with you at base 0. I have to, there's a whole bunch of other kids. So there is a negativity to it. And so when you're a kid, you're more like, I'll just try to control my accent as much as I can. I'll, make sure I don't make any funny sounds. And you try to keep it at that. Now it's different because it's like, everybody wants their kid to learn Spanish. And so when you come to work, I think in Chicago, it's like every job application that you fill out is going to say, if you speak Spanish, we want you, right? It's almost a given. Like if your last name is Hernandez or Martinez or something, they're like, all right, they speak Spanish, bring them in, right? And they're let down when that person doesn't speak Spanish, and then they're surprised. It's like, well, you kind of frowned upon it when we were in school, and now we can't speak it.
Yeah.
So, because when you were in school, it was like, we don't know what you're saying, you have to speak English. When you're in the workforce, it's like, do you speak Spanish, and can you come help us out? And so when you're here, in Cincinnati, it's completely different. It's like, oh my God, you speak Spanish? Come over here, say something weird. And it's like, I'm not a clown for you. It's just, but if you need help translating, I'll be there. So it's very different. Like when you're growing up, it's almost frowned upon. And then when you grow up, it's like, they want it. That's what they want.
Yeah.
So it's very weird.
Do you almost feel like in the workforce, it's more of a spectacle sometimes that you speak Spanish? Like it's so unusual that people like make note of that and that's what they associate with you? Or what's your experience like in the workforce knowing Spanish? Or being identified as someone who speaks Spanish?
That one's okay. I work for the county, so this is going to be a very correct question. It can be a little frustrating, I think, when people say, oh, you speak Spanish, so they make up certain things in their mind about you, certain misconceptions. And, we all do when we first meet someone. But I'll give you guys an example. The first time that, when you're going out as a field officer, so you're going to go check on houses, right? You have to have a radio call signal. And the dispatcher has to know that that's who you, like, this number. So, for example, if my radio is 6 Henry something, they're going to know that this 6 Henry is attached to me, right? So you have a pre-ID and everything. And they'll ask you, like, over the phone when you set this up, they'll say, do you have any allergies? So that they know in case you don't have your EpiPen to bring an EpiPen. Do you, what's your site? And one of the questions that they ask is, do you speak any other languages? And so I said, yes, I speak Spanish. And they said, oh, perfect, because we only have 4 of you in the county, or in the district. And I was like, oh, okay, great. They're like, so we'll call you if you're out in the field. If we need a Spanish speaker, we'll call you. And so in that case, it comes out very helpful, because the last thing you want is somebody getting hurt because they're not understanding what another person's saying to them. But in the other case where you're just doing office work, it's like, oh, you speak Spanish? So where are you from? I'm from Chicago. That's where I'm from. It's like, that's where I'm from. Or you get stuff like, oh, you should have, can I ask you how to say a couple things before I go to Mexico on vacation or something? I'm like, I'm not Rosetta Stone, I'm just a coworker. But it comes in handy with certain things, you don't, when I'm on the phone with my family, I'm like, okay, nobody's going to understand what I'm saying. Yeah. It's all good. But there's, it's a double-edged where, you can really help, and sometimes it just gets really aggravating for people to be asking you certain things. So you just got to deal with it.
Yeah. So, going back to you saying, I'm from Chicago.
Yes.
Chicago is my home.
Yep.
But your heritage is Mexican. So, did you have any very Mexican traditions growing up in Chicago, despite being in the United States? Well,
Chicago is like the little, cuna for all the Latin and Hispanic communities, because you can ask a Puerto Rican that exact same question. They're going to be like, oh no, Chicago's Puerto Rican. You can ask that to a German guy, be like, Chicago's German. It's like, no, Chicago's everything. So yeah, there was on 26th Street, when it was the Independence Day, all over Chicago and all these other little communities, it was like, everybody's honking their horns, everybody's got their flags out, everybody's wearing their team jersey. It was everywhere. But at the same time, when it was the 4th of July, I think I saw more Hispanic and Latino families celebrating that than I would. And it was so funny because I'd be like, and these families would be like recently arrived immigrants, with their kids, and their kids would be like all waving flags, and parents would be like, you better know what that flag stands for and everything because you're American. So it's very, like I said, is yeah, you have this experience of being Mexican, but you also have this extreme need to almost prove that you're American. But yeah, Chicago's it's just different. It's just very different than here. You can have every ethnicity claiming that that's what Chicago is, but the truth is, it's so many cultures in one, and it's just managed to work.
Yeah. So how does that contrast being in Ohio, in Cincinnati?
Oh my God.
What was your first impression of Latin culture in Cincinnati?
There wasn't one. I got into Cincinnati in 2011, late 2011, like almost August, and I knew, I was like, okay, the Mount took me, so I'm gonna go, and then I realized how small it was. And the high school I went to had like 4,000 kids. Oh. The Mount has 1,000 altogether, you know, and it's 2 floors. So you're like, this is very different. You went from a place where it was humongous, and you had people who were from the Philippines, from Israel, from everywhere. You had it in one school. When you come over here, in the area, I just recently learned that they called it like an extra high school, because it's all the kids that stayed in their area went to the Mount. And so they would all know each other, and they were all American. And it was very rare that you would meet, I think maybe there was 2 other, kids who were minorities there. And it was just like, okay, so there really isn't much going on here. And if you didn't have a car, you really wouldn't see any other person that was brown like you are. It's like, no more brown people. It's just, this is what you're stuck with. You're going to deal with it. So it was like, I would watch Netflix just so I can hear Spanish again. And I'd be like, okay, I can't forget it because I need it for later when I go to work. And then once I got a car, though, if you go down this way, there's like a very generic Mexican restaurant. But there's also like 2 little stores if you keep driving further down. And the lady who owns the store owns the restaurant right next to it. Oh. So I'm like, okay, so that's OG. Like, that's where I have to hit it up. And so that's where they hide at. It's like you have to find the little spots where it might be a store, and you might know everybody gets paid on Friday, so you know that on Friday everyone's going to be there. So you have to just figure out where these little stores are at, and so once I figured out where they were, I said, okay, now like I know where that community is. But if you stay up here, or if you go downtown, or if you just stay in the suburbs, you're not really going to catch a lot of that community, because they're not out and about very well. Right. Yeah.
So kind of going in a different direction, you talked about being a parole officer? Probation officer. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit like how you got into that career and how speaking Spanish may influence that career? You kind of talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I used to work, I was a pretrial officer, so we were the people that would interview people who recently got arrested, right? And so these guys would be right in front of us, and we ask them, hey, like, do you have insurance? Do you need a public attorney? What can we do for you? Can we make a call for you? Sort of thing, right? And we also help judges set a bond for these guys. So if we knew this guy, like, had literally no money, we were going to be like, you know what, judge, he can't pay $500 to get out of jail, and we don't have room to keep him. You should release him because we think he's a low risk and he's going to come back for court. So that's the type of work that I did. It just so happened that my boss at the time was about to change jobs. He was going to be a bailiff for Judge Cooper, and Judge Cooper was going to run this specialty court. So here in Cincinnati, we have a handful of specialty courts, like a drug court, a change court, mental health court, and one of them, the one that I work for, is Veterans Court, where we take veterans who have become addicted to any substance, and we help them sort of work to change that about them. And in the process, because a lot of these guys don't have violent charges, is erase that charge from their record, so they no longer have a felony. So Andy was about to be a bailiff for Judge Cooper, and we both happened to be Cubs fans. So one of the first things we talked about was the Cubs. And so I joke now that my job now is because I was a Cubs fan. And so like literally we could talk about anything. And so one day he approached me and he said, I know you're in the military, and I know you went to school, you have your degree already. How would you feel about being a probation officer? And I said, yeah, I'm there. Like, that's cool. He's like, but you'd be one for a specialty court. And I said, that's fine. I'll still be a probation officer. I'll do work. And so it took a couple months for the interview process and all that. And then once I was brought in, it was day one. Here's your caseload. It's like 70 different folders. And you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to Google every answer. But I'm going to smile like I know what I'm doing. So it was that, and then you're almost thrust immediately into the paperwork of it, and you get the handle of it. It's not difficult work, but it's also work where if you're not careful, that's somebody's life that you're messing with, you know. So now that when you have a handle on it, you know a little bit better. Okay, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do for this guy. But it's just so yeah. It came from being a Cubs fan to now doing this.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I attribute it to.
Well, you also said that he mentioned that you were in the military. Did that give you kind of an end to that position in the first
think
place?
so, because she was looking for somebody very specific. She had she tried to pull other officers that were already working, but it was very much, they were sort of already indoctrinated into the culture there at work, to where I think they might have been a little too by the book for her. So where they would immediately want to issue a violation out for someone, she would want more of a therapeutic approach, because that's what a specialty court is. You look for other ways to help someone instead of directly to jail, or, you know, I'm going to go search everything they have. Like, they want different answers. These officers didn't have different answers. It was just they were more prone to go for a full force effect rather than let's take a step back and see how we can fix this. And she knew she didn't want just someone with a civilian background, because everybody else that works for that court is almost a civilian. Like, I think a couple of them are vets, but they're like Marine vets from everywhere. But she tries to very much keep it in, if you have a military background, we want you to work with us because you bring a different perspective. And she doesn't have a military background. So she definitely wants that type of mindset around. So the officer that they had there, they have two now, but he used to be a first sergeant, which in the military is like the dad figure. Like, that's like, when you mess up, he's going to give it to you, and when you don't mess up, he's going to pat you on the back. So they had that guy, but he wasn't a felony officer. He was a misdemeanor officer. So those are different departments. So they knew they couldn't stick him to do both caseloads. So they were looking for somebody else, and she wanted someone who wasn't already indoctrinated in the culture, who was military background, but also had some sort of psych education. So I happened to fit all those check marks, and I was like, okay. I was like, wow, okay. And that's how it just ended up happening, that I had everything she was looking for, and that was that.
Nice. So what inspired you to go into the military in the first place?
Oh, I knew I was going to be in the military since like day one.
Really?
Like back in the day when they had the Marine commercials where he was like climbing the mountain and they'd be like, you could be anything you want to be. And you saw the face on the mountainside and I'd be like, we'll be that dude. But then I like quickly realized, like, no, those are Marines. I do not want to be that dude. I was like, I'll be like Army. I don't want to be a Marine. And so like I knew from day one what I was going to do. Like when I was a kid, I had the fatigues. I had a fatigue costume that I'm pretty sure I lived in for like a full week before my mom made me take it off. And so like there's school pictures that I took with this uniform. My mom still has them. And like I knew, like they knew that was going to be the end thing. Like I think more sure than I was about going to college, I knew I was going to go to the military. Like that was just the thing. It just happened that when I graduated high school, I didn't immediately join. I was going to do the ROTC program to become an officer, and it just didn't vibe very well with me. I didn't really understand the point of their program very well, and I didn't agree with it. And so, but I still managed. I said, you know what? I'm still going to basic training. I'm going to go be at least an enlisted soldier. And so that's where it started. So in 2012, I left for basic training in Fort Jackson in South Carolina in May through August, and it was like the hottest place I've ever been, ever. Like you could see the heat coming off the pavement, and like it was just hot. And then I've been in since that time, and so that's just how it ended up being.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did you see many Latinos in your basic training or in the military in general, or is it not?
I think when you go to basic training, you see everything. Like you see people who are literally going into the military to gain residency papers. So actually when we graduated, they brought those people up and they were like, hey, these guys are becoming American citizens today. Because once they successfully graduate, that whole process ends for them and they can start sort of working it out. That doesn't mean the military does paperwork right, because we see a lot of vets coming back from Iraq being deported because that paperwork isn't done correctly. But you see everything. So there's definitely more of a, like there's more. You're not the only Latino or Latino there. You're not the only black person there. You're not the only person from, I don't know, like there's people from Syria there. Like you're not the only person that's there. So you don't, and the way that the way that they sort of mold you, you never really feel like you're alone because every other person there is going through the exact same thing you are. Mm. So it wasn't, I don't even think I noticed how many like ethnicities there were there because it was never that. It was just, let's just try to get through today. That was it.
So kind of transitioning a little bit since we've been talking about the military, mm-hmm. I noticed that one of your tattoos has ammo.
Yeah.
On
the skull. Yeah.
So if you would want to explain maybe like the inspiration for that tattoo or its symbolism.
You know, most of my tattoos I really got out of a whim. But this tattoo was my favorite, but it was also one that hurt the most. But I got it because I knew, you know, when you have Mexican culture really more respects death than fears it. You know it's going to be part of it. It's almost like a chapter change. There's going to be something different, right? And so the other part that I incorporated into this tattoo was when the Mexican Revolution started. It was, I think, a lot of men that like the history is like, you know, we had these brave warriors and they were all men and all that, and it's simply not true because when you look back at it, a lot of the women had a huge part in the war effort there. You know, they were the ones wearing the bandoliers. They were the ones leading horses away. They were the ones making sure that soldiers were fed, soldiers were taken care of. And at the same time, they weren't afraid to pick up a weapon and go to the front line. So in this tattoo, I sought to really bring my military and the military of the women that came before me into that. It's like it's not just a man that can do the fight. It's there's always going to be a female somewhere, even if it's in the background. But without that person, you know, you're really not going to, it's not going to be mission success. So that's what I wanted to do with this one, and my tattoo artist just happened to do it right. I was very happy about it.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself seeking out opportunities to maybe like help empower women or do any activism?
You know, that part is hard. If there was I think Dolores Huerta wrote an article some time ago. This was back when she was, you know, doing that whole unionizing and thing, and she wrote an article because when they were unionizing, it was that movement and the women's lib movement at the same time. So she wrote an article that said, you know, I'm a woman, but I'm Latina too. And so being Latina always came before being a woman. And so I think I've always been that way where it's like, you know, empower women, but it's like, I think more about empowering my whole group rather than just my one gender. So it's, in the place I work at, I don't think on both sides, it's not, I haven't really been under the experience of people, you know, I haven't been really working with women who are maybe cast aside from leadership roles, rather they're put in it. So like I work for a female judge. Most of the judges there that I've seen, well, not most of the judges, but a handful of judges are female. And those happen to be the ones that scare me the most because they have like this eyebrow look down and you're like, man, I screwed up. Like if I was a defendant, I knew I'd be screwed because I just don't want to see that look. So I don't have that experience of, you know, maybe women being cast aside or being undecisive or being seen as weak. That is not the case where I work at. So yeah, I don't, you know, I think it's more of if I see, you know, when you see the Latino community here especially, it's like, you don't. They only come out on paydays. They only come out at dinner time. So I think I would do more for that than just, not just women, but I think my interest is more in enabling that community rather than a separate community that I see is doing quite well here. Yeah.
Were there opportunities to get involved with the Latino community here when you were in college here?
No.
No, not at all?
Nope, because there's like the clubs, there's no like, hey, you know, like, what is it, like, Hispanic club, or like in high school it was Olas. My cousin just started his fraternity in Western Illinois, and there's something about Hispanics, and it's like, and I was like, do you only accept like Hispanic people? He said, no, we accept anyone, but it just happens to be only Hispanics are signing up for it. I'm like, all right, cool, but not here. It's not the same because, like I said, there's not a lot of young working adults that are Hispanic. You get the parents and you get their little kids. That's what's here.
So, are your parents still in Chicago?
Yes.
So, when you go and visit your parents in Chicago, is there much, well, you said Chicago in general is much more Latino and like Latino friendly and populated. Is there anything that you always do when you go home that's like part of your culture?
Well, not part of my culture, but definitely part of my diet. So there's a street market, and it's Canal Street. Everybody goes there. It's every Sunday. It has to start early, but it's almost a whole bunch of taco people get there, and they make their tacos. And I'm not talking like, store-bought tortillas. No, like the ladies will make their tortillas in front of you, and then serve you. And so I was like, you know what? If you killed the cow here, I would still eat here because this place is amazing. So like that's something that I try to do with my parents is go to the market, eat some food, look around, and see what's going on. But let's see, is there anything else? I honestly think that's like the biggest one, that I have to be there. I won't be there in the cold because they don't do it when it's cold weather. But for most of the summer, if I go back every month, that's going to be the thing that I do every Sunday is go and do that. We make a joke about it because, tacos al pastor, and my dad's like, you're a sinner, you never go to church. And I was like, I went to a pastor. I don't know what you're talking about.
So, was that a part of your childhood growing up, was going to church?
No, not at all. They just make a joke about it. No, they almost had to drag me to do my first communion because I didn't want to do it. I thought it was, we weren't really connected with the church. That's not to say we weren't religious.
Yeah.
Because my grandma would pray the rosary in any place she'd be at. Like if she was in the bathroom too long, it's because she was saying the rosary. I don't know why. But it just, the church wasn't really part of it. I think the bigger part of everything was there's a place there called the flea market. And my parents, because they believed in working every day of the week, they had a booth there and they would just sell a whole bunch of random stuff. And so they have a booth, they have kids running around, so all the kids went and helped out too. So that was a big thing about growing up, was learning that work ethic and the no days off kind of approach, to where kids would, when it was funny because when it was Friday, I dreaded Friday when I was growing up because I was like, Saturday and Sunday I'm gonna wake up even earlier, we're gonna go to the flea market, we gotta set up and make sure that we get what we went there for. And yeah, it was, now looking back I'm like, it wasn't that bad. I wouldn't do it again, but it wasn't that bad.
So you mentioned your grandma. Did you have all of your extended family in Chicago? So
it was my grandma, my parents, and my aunt that on my mom's side. And so that's who I had here. And my aunt had 4 kids, and she wasn't very responsible. So my 4 cousins ended up at my parents' house. And so my grandma lived with us for a long time. So when I was growing up, a lot of kids were like, I'm going to grandma's house. I was like, Grandma doesn't live with you? I have a living grandma. She makes me whatever I want. So it was everybody in this one family house. We just stayed there. So it was, she was there all the time. So it was pretty fun.
Were there obvious cultural differences between the way your grandma was an immigrant living in America, between your parents, or maybe? No,
because they both came at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So the only difference was, I think, between me growing up in the United States and them growing up in Mexico, and they were like, we still make the joke where I'm like, I'm an import. So I was just made in Mexico, it's just brought here. So I always make that joke, and my mom's like, that's not right, you're American. I'm like, okay, woman. But I think it was different for my grandma because she came from, and I think it was the time was different. The mindset of the years where she grew up were very different from where we were. So she was very much we have to save everything because you never know when this is going to happen. I'm like, we live in Chicago. We're not going to get hit by a hurricane today. It's just not going to happen. It's physically impossible. But she was very much we have to save everything. If there's always food at the house, you don't need to throw that shirt away. I can just sew it back together. Very, very conservative about her resources, but also very I think the biggest cultural difference, not even in my family, but between myself and other kids in school, was my grandma was always there. And so it was the constant, you knew she was there, and she was always going to smother you with anything. So when other kids would be like, oh yeah, my grandma gave me $5, she's so cool, I'd be like, my grandma gave me a 5-course meal last night, it was delicious. So it was very different. The way that they express their love is very, very different from that. Yeah. And it I never realized how much it stuck with me until I was working Dr. McDonough's project, and the question came up of whether we should accept grandparents as close relatives. And I said, of course.
Yeah.
Why not? And the other person said, but why? And I said, what do you mean by why? It's your grandparents. Like, I was like, you're going to take boyfriend over grandparent? That makes no sense. And so they were like, you obviously grew up very differently than us. I was like, I obviously did. Because I did not see it that way. So yeah, like it keeps popping up. Like just the cultural differences are everywhere.
Is there a story or memory with your grandma that's your favorite, you think?
That's tough. I was a pretty selfish kid. So there's one where she was teaching us how to, is it sew? The thing with the 2 needles? Or knitting. Yeah. There we go, knitting. And so she was teaching us that, and I don't have patience for that. But my cousin Martha does, and so she was really close to my grandma. She was knitting away. And I remember that I got super upset because I wasn't getting 100% of the attention. So I, like, threw the needles off. And my grandma was like, why are you so upset? And I'm like, why are you giving so much attention to Martha? Like, out of nowhere. She's like, you all live here. There's only one me. Like, what do you want me to do? And so, like, it was, like, I don't know why that one stuck with me for so long, but it's just, like, the one that I'm always like, she's tough, but she's fair. I mean, she was pretty equal with her time. But yeah, and like I don't even know why I took up knitting because I was not good at it. Like I was just not good at it, so it was not my thing.
Who do you think is one of the most important people in your life, you'd say? Or the most influential?
The most influential? Ooh, probably my grandma, but she passed away, so yeah, no, still my grandma. Yeah.
Any reason why in particular?
I mean, you have to think about leaving your home, leaving what you know, okay, for not even a full promise, but more of an idea, you know? And like she had a small store she was running in Mexico. She had her own place, and she went from that. She crossed the border. She went through like half of the United States to make it up to Chicago, where it's freaking cold. And you know, so she went from something where she was very much independent to where she was very dependent. And so, and she, even though she did that, it was still. I don't think I ever heard her complain about. This house is, this food's not good. No, it was never that. It was always like, what can we do to make it better? You know, it was always a mentality of, I've made do with less. So that's sort of the thing where it's like, she was just, like, when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate it. But now I'm like, you know, it hurt to leave Chicago, and I can go back whenever I want. She couldn't go back. Yeah. She didn't know how to speak English. So it was like, she went through all these obstacles, and she still stayed there. So I'm just like, yeah, I want to be like her. Yeah. But be able to speak English. It's the only difference.
So, let's see. So, looking back on the experiences that your grandma had, what type of advice, and your family in general, what type of advice do you think you'd give new immigrants, new Latino immigrants coming to the United States?
Learn English. Like, as soon as you can, learn English. Because I think this is an experience now that a lot of the younger kids are having is having to translate for their parents. And it's not something that's comfortable. It makes you grow up very fast. It makes you question a lot of things because you're the mediator between two adults. And so when you're 5-6 years old and the only reason that they're asking you to do this is because they can't phrase something correctly, it's very not demeaning, but it's definitely like, if I screw this up, you don't know what the outcome is going to be for your family. So I would say learn English as fast as you can because, one, you know, you're coming to a country that's not, well, while some areas may be very accepting of an immigrant community, I think it should be more as a sign of respect because if you're going to make this your new home, you have to embrace certain things. And one of the biggest things is embrace the language. And, you know, being able to speak English not only opens their door to more jobs, but it makes it more available. They make themselves more available to expand their kids' education. So I think my parents immediately realized that I did not like translating. So one of the first things they did was like they went to night classes to learn English. And so I don't know if you guys heard this, but like women tend to grab onto the language a little bit quicker. So my mom has less of an accent than my dad. But my dad still speaks English, but he still doesn't like speaking it because he's got an accent. So there's still times where, like, now that I grow up, I'm like, yeah, Dad, don't worry, I'll do all the talking. But when I was growing up, it would be like, hey, he'd even be like, hey, can you let him know this? And I'd be like, why? You speak English. He's like, no, seriously, just do it. And now, like, when my accent comes out, I'm very aware, like, that's why he wanted me to do it. Because you feel slower. You feel at a different level than everybody else. So for new immigrants, it's learn English. That's it.
Okay. Another transition. Do you keep up with any Latino holidays or celebrations? Like, did you have a quinceañera growing up?
No.
Or?
Oh, God, no. No. I don't know if you can't see it, but I'm not very girly. No, I did not have that. I was very anti-quinceañera and all that. But I do keep up with, like, and this was just recent, which was, you know, El Dia de los Muertos. I kept up with that. And so I made my altar, and then I had to take it down, but I put it up. But like the way I think we've become more American in our way of celebrating Christmas. But there's always like tamales. So when I was growing up, it'd be like Christmas, screw presents, because one, I didn't get them because we were broke. But two, it'd be like, I'm gonna eat all this food today. So I think that's the biggest part I've kept up is I'm going home for Christmas so I can eat food.
And what type of food did you always have besides tamales?
Oh, it would be like gorditas. It'd be, what else did she make? Oh my God. It'd be sopes. She'd make, we would make pozole, menudo, champurrado. Oh my God. I'm like getting hungry. Just think about it. But it would be literally everything there would be handmade, and it was like, it was almost cooler that it was handmade and not store bought.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'd be like, y'all can't get this anywhere else. And so it was just there. But no, it's almost like I've never feared diabetes more in my life than at Christmas time. Because you're like, this is a lot of sugar. We should take a step back. And then there's your mom like, have some more champurrado. And you're like, you know what? Why not?
And then who are the cooks in your family, would you think?
My mom and my dad are pretty good cooks. And my aunt is just fantastic when she wants to be. But she sort of hides that one like her superpower or something. But my mom and dad get really into it. My mom more when it's like gorditas and stuff like that. Especially now that she's got her, so mostly everyone now is, with the exception of my sister, is out of the house. And so she's got people in New York. I'm over here. You know, there's like 2 in South Chicago and then 1 in like Western Illinois in school. So when it happens where all the moons align and you're just sort of, everybody congregates to the house, she's like, I'm gonna go get some masa and we're gonna have some gorditas. And it's like, yes, this is fantastic. And like you can, like she'll make that, she'll make breakfast in the morning. She never used to make breakfast. Now she makes breakfast when I'm there. It's great. But yeah, I think she's more the bigger one with more traditional foods, to where my dad is like, I'm gonna grill the salmon and see what happens.
And then, so what do you think is the proudest moment in your life so far? Yeah.
Ooh, the proudest moment? Probably. Let's see. I don't know. It wasn't even graduate basic training. No. It was in. April 26th of this year when I got promoted. So in the military there's lower ranks, so you have your fuzzy, which is just your new private, probably out of high school, hasn't even gone to college yet, you know. Then you got your private first class, they've probably been in for a year, or they joined with maybe 1 or 2 college credits. And then there's a Ph.D, which is an E3, which is what I originally came in with because I was in college. So once you're in college, you're like, okay, you're not stupid. You can sort of handle it yourself. We're not going to make you complete fuzzy. But you still don't know everything, right? And then you go up to specialist, and that one is you're getting ready to sort of, in the Army, sort of make the big jump from E4 to E5, which is we call it the sham shield, is the specialist rank, because it literally looks like an upside-down shield. And so you're a little bit above a private, you don't know a lot, but you definitely know enough to get you through. You don't have any responsibilities as far as other soldiers may look up to you a bit, but they're not following your direction. You're still very much in like, you're being mentored to go up to the next rank. So when you reach your sergeant, now it's like, okay, you have a better grasp on things. We're going to give you a couple people under you. This is going to be your team. These are your responsibilities. You have to, it's more about like, if there's a job out there, you better take the initiative to take lead over that gaggle of soldiers. It's more of like, if there's an accident, you have to know how to deal with it. If you're truck deadlines, you have to know how to get it back up and running. So in April 26th of this year, I was finally promoted to that rank. And it was one of the best sergeants that I've ever had. He literally sent me a text, and I was driving to work. And he's like, "Hey, I'm super proud of you." And it was a snapshot of my orders. Like, it wasn't even my real orders in PDF form. No, it was a picture of my orders. And it was like, "You're moving to this unit, you're getting this rank." And I was like, holy crap, it happened. And it was like that. I think that one was more of a personal goal that I had that accomplished. So, you know, like graduating from school, that happened. But it was like, I knew that was going to happen. You know, graduating from basic training, I knew that was going to happen. Getting a job, that had to happen. So it's not really something to be proud of. But getting the sergeant stuff, it's like, you didn't know if that was going to happen. Like, you have to be on the list, you have to be so high, and like, you have to really step up your game to learn what it means to be at that level. And even if it's just like an entry sort of leadership level, it definitely changes your perspective to where it was like, I'll be a soldier because of me, to it's like, I'm a soldier because I need to lead these guys. So that was this year. That has to be like my proudest moment, and it happened in my car at 6 a.m. So
what did your parents say when you told them?
Oh my god, my parents are funny because they're like, well, you know, by your age, we already had a house and a child, so you're not that impressive. You know what, you're right. Like, I remember when I graduated school, I think my dad was like, don't think you're all hot because, you know, you have a degree now. We crossed a whole border by the time we were your age. And I was like, oh, that's cold, but it's so true. And I think it's like, you know, they're aware of that it's not easy, but they're also like, they remind me to just humble down, because there's always people that they might be playing a quieter game, but that doesn't mean they're not going to come out and be like superstars when it comes to it. So you just got to keep your head down and just keep going through.
I wanted to ask you specifically about your experience at the university, a small private university, as maybe one of the very few Latinas in college. I wanted to know what was that like, and also whether you feel it impacted anything, like your academics or your, and it could be positive or negative, or in between. So just what your experience was.
Okay. So, yeah, the Mount has like 1,000 students. It's not very diverse. Excuse me. I was told it used to be diverse prior to 9/11 because they took all the, you know, immigrant kids from everywhere. All the student exchange, they did that. No, they don't do that anymore. But when I went, it was predominantly American, white American kids. Pretty, you know, I would say maybe middle class, you know, and I was not middle class, so I was like, I'm here on like Army money and a scholarship, so that's what I'm here on. But it was different because here, specifically in the west side of Cincinnati, everybody knows one another. And when you don't know somebody, it's like, we don't know who they are. They're not standoffish, but they're not exactly welcoming. And that doesn't mesh well because I'm not very welcoming either. So it's like, you know, it was like two people bumping heads. But going to the Mount was different because it forced you, especially coming from a big city, it was like it forced you to try to connect more with people or try to understand where they came from. When I came from Chicago, I was, you know, straight out of high school, so I was like, my side is right, you know, I know everything. And then you meet professors who are like, no, you don't. And so I remember very specifically professors who would bring me like different materials. And it was like, you had to know, with the Mount and with the professors that they have, you have to know a little bit about everything and at least a lot about one thing. So you have to be very well spoken in a lot of different areas just so you can have a good conversation. So taking that on, I knew once I knew that was their game, I was like, I like it here because that's how I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn a lot. And, you know, as far as education, as far as like school and grade stuff, I think the first semester I was rocking it. I was there. But then, you know, you get a little jaded and it's like, oh, college, I should have like other experiences too. And then it was like, there was a semester where I remember I was just angry because it's like, how am I the only Latina here? Like, why is this the only thing? Or it would be little microaggression instances or comments here and there that you would hear, and it's like, this, who told you that's okay to say, you know? And so that was, I think, for some reason, it was one semester where just little things like that just ticked me off. So me being upset and having a lot of work to do, I didn't cope with it well. So my grades did go down a bit, not to where I failed the class, but it definitely, you know, impacted what I was doing. But for the most part, it was pretty average in school because if I didn't like the subject, and it happens now, if I'm not very interested in the subject, I'll get it done. You'll just know that I wasn't very interested in the subject. But with other things, I think the thing that they pushed the most was you have to listen to the other side of the argument. And you have to understand, like, you have to understand your argument so well that you would know how to destroy your own argument. So that's what I took from them out. Because I don't think a lot of students take it, but I think it's something that a lot of professors pushed, where it was like, if you're going to come up with a solution to something, it better be a solution. Don't come to me with like, let's raise awareness, because that does nothing. Come with me with, you know, actual policy changes, actual practice changes. So they really pushed that more than anything else. And that's why I appreciate them out so much, because it made me look at that and look at the full picture, not just at my side.
So 2 questions to end the interview, and is thinking back about you mentioned it a little bit, your first impressions of being in Cincinnati and navigating Cincinnati, and the work, your job as directly related to the Latino community in any way, if there is a relationship there.
Yeah, there is. Unfortunately, it's not I don't think it's what I would want it to be, because you're part of law enforcement, and it's not something that they tend to, like, immediately say hi to you or something, you know? So, you know, maybe, I think I've done it maybe a handful of times where if we're out doing some sort of work in the field and I happen to be driving a car, everybody will be like, well, I'm stopping for lunch, and I'll be like, I need to find the little tiendita and I need to get like a snack, and that's what I'll do. And so most of the places that I go to, if I keep going to them and if I go with all my stuff on, once they get the gist that, you know, she's literally just here to buy a snack, they're like really welcoming. They're like, oh, hey, it's you. Yeah, come right in. Where other times it's like, I think I went to one place with my uniform on, and it's usually a place that I would go with nothing on, just, you know, regular clothes. And they were like, you do that too? And I was like, what don't you do? And I was like, oh, you know, a lot of things that are illegal I wouldn't do, but I come here to eat. So, but when you're working on probation, it's different, because a lot of people think, I think a lot of people in the regular jobs think, you know, they have a preconceived notion of what a criminal looks like. Okay, so specifically here in Cincinnati, the big issue is heroin, cocaine, a whole bunch of drugs, right? So a lot of the older generation thinks of cocaine. They think of black person, a black person, or they think of heroin. They're like, oh, it's the cartels, it's all these, you know, Mexicans bringing this stuff over. And that's simply not the case, because what you see sitting in front of, like, what I would see sitting in front of me is, you know, maybe a 20 to 24-year-old female, white, from a pretty well-off family, who has a home because her family's still taking care of her. And then so that's what I see. That's on my end. And so when I go out and work in the field, and it's like, yeah, maybe I'll see like a person that I might know, but it's like, do I really want to go say hi to them wearing this, you know? And then it comes back to, I think this happened a couple weeks ago. We went to do a search on a house, and I had to stay outside because the guy we had already detained him. He was already in our car, and his girlfriend, like, I saw her car flying. Like, she was like full U-turn. I was like, great, here we go. And so I was like, you know, this is why we're here. This is what we're doing. Our guys were already in the house looking at it. And so she called some more people up, and we had maybe 6 officers there because she kept on calling more people over. So I was like, no, I'm just literally like just keeping an eye on everyone, because you guys are all calling more people. It's making me really uncomfortable. But this family was black. And so grandma starts talking, and grandma starts saying something like, you know, you guys are abusing your power. You guys are being like, if I was a white person, you'd be answering my question. And so she was very much just saying we were being full-on racist. And while she never directed anything like that at me, she directed to my supervisor who was right behind me. And the reason we weren't giving them answers was because we were still finding more stuff in the house. And they didn't even know that was in the house. So they were very defensive. But at the same time, the whole time I'm standing there, I'm like, you know what? Like, we're not giving them an answer. I would be feeling disrespected if I was on the other end of that. It's like, is it being racist? Like, would we have answered the question? Like, I would have probably not answered the question, whatever color you are. I'm not answering your question because I'm not in the house. I don't know what's in there. I was like, besides, I'm just brought here for security. I literally do not know why I'm here. But I started thinking, like, would it have been handled differently if this family was white? And so having Ground just yell it out, I was like, it really makes you think. It's like, this is not the way that you want to connect with another minority culture, because, the struggle is very much for every minority culture. The struggle is the same. It's like you're just trying to almost prove that you're as American as, the larger community is. So that one really made me sort of think and reassess what I was doing as an officer, and making sure that if I'm speaking to, a white family, I'm speaking the exact same way to a black family, to a brown family, to, whatever color you are, that I'm equal with each and every one. And I think, and so she really made me think about it. But then, like, you get field work, and then you get office work. And when I'm in the office, it's like, I only do felony cases. So people who picked up felonies, mostly, there's not a lot of Hispanic people that would pick up a felony. I think we had one. And they shoved him over to me because he was like, look, I speak English and understand it, but I prefer to speak Spanish. And I said, no problem, man. We'll get you on your way. And he has like a 1-year probation period. He's got to do some community service hours and pay a fine. So I was like, look, this is what you got to do. And he's like, can I just like pay off the community service hours? And I was like, no, the judge just wants to take up your time to make a point. That's what they're there for. Mm-hmm. So being able to help him sort of navigate the probationary period in a way that it wasn't going to affect him or his kids or his family, that was cool. And then you get, for some reason, well, not for some reason, it's because it's DUIs. DUIs are like the biggest offense that a Latino or Hispanic is going to commit, a DUI. Usually around Christmas, big holidays, that's when they'll be in there. So September was a big one because it was Mexican Independence Month. So there was an influx of people on probation who speak Spanish, and so they go to a specific officer downstairs who, she's American, but she speaks Spanish. And so I always know it's her Spanish because she speaks it very differently. But she's never, like, I just sort of listen to her because she talks very loudly. And so she's never been disrespectful or anything like that. And I was like, you know what? Like, kudos to her for literally treating every single case the same. There's no difference. Like, she knows, she might even like remember their kids' names, and like when their parties were like, how was this? How was that? And it's like, okay, well, you're done next month, so just remember to stay out of trouble. And so, and just, I was like, you know what? She really is she's a very unique officer to have there, because she's American, she speaks Spanish, and she doesn't mistreat or disrespect anyone. So just, I think as far as probation, having all those experiences, I was like, really got to work on just being fair and neutral with everyone. Do
you think you have an opportunity as especially when you're in uniform and you're going into these communities just to get a snack right at tiendita? Do you think there's an opportunity for you to be more welcoming, or maybe breaking those boundaries between the idea of law enforcement and the Latino community, that relationship that exists in a positive way?
Yeah, definitely, because it's when you go in there and you're wearing, whether it's my military uniform or it's my vest, one of the first things they do is they see me, and then they sort of look at like what I'm gonna pick out. And so like, I guess if I pick like cacahuatas, they're like, maybe she speaks Spanish, but maybe her mom just told her to get that. And so they're like, sort of like really keep an eye on you. And then when you come up to pay for it, they're like, all right, that'll be this, this, and this. And so I'm like, buenos días, señora, ¿cómo está? And they're like, oh, okay, no, okay, we cool. And so like like once you start speaking Spanish to them, and I think, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like Spanish is much more of a warmer language than English is. So you definitely have to have almost like a full body language that goes with it. And so as soon as they hear that, they feel a little bit better. And so I think there was one where I was looking for a guy, and so I said, I said, Señora, ¿ha visto esta señora? And I showed her the picture. It's like, no, no lo he visto por aquí. It's like, why are you looking for him? I'll keep an eye out. And I was like, thank you. And so I gave her my card, and she's like, well, are you going to answer the phone call? And I said, yeah, that's my phone number. And she said, okay, because, well, I can't speak English. And I was like, don't worry about it. You just say bueno, and I will know it's you. And she's like, okay. So it's just building those little networks with the store owners, or having more of a presence in these areas where, people might feel maybe a little afraid to call cops, a little afraid to just go up to them. But if they see us in the area, and if they see me, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I can go up to her. So that's what I think I've been aiming for, is to be that small little connection to something that if they need help, that I'm there. But yeah, I think mostly it's just speaking Spanish to them. That's the big one. I don't know why.
Is there anything else that you would like to add to this interview?
As far as what?
Anything about your experience as a Latina here in the state, or at the university, or in Chicago, or in any of the many things that you've already done, military?
I think being a Latina is almost like a secret superpower that you're taught to hide and then bring out for job interviews for some reason. So I think, especially now with the different generations, it's become more of a, when you start off, you want to sort of keep it away. When you go to college, it's like, no, I'm brown, I'm proud, I'm going to put it out there. And when you go into the professional world, it's mostly like, especially when you work in certain jobs, you have to have a very professional opinion about what you are. But at the same time, be there as a constant reminder that, not everyone who is black, not everyone who's brown, not everyone who's Asian, whatever, is going to stick to their stereotypical job. They are, they're everywhere. They can do anything. And so it's mostly, for me, being a Latina here in Cincinnati, it's become more of a, yep, I'm not a drug dealer. I didn't flunk out of college. I didn't have 5 kids. Instead, I'm doing this. And so what I'd like to think of is like, set the standard for that generation that's coming behind you. Or that one person who's like, you know what, I don't need to go to school, I don't need to do this. And be like, yeah, you do. Because if you don't, this is what happens. So I think for me, it's become more of this adrenaline to keep focused on what I'm doing, and to sort of not break down stereotypical barriers, but remind people that that's why there are stereotypes, because they're not real. Like, there's people doing everything else other than the stereotypical jobs. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what I would say.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Yeah, thank you
it's been
so
a pleasure.
much.